So check this out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 growth rings in this bow, in the handle. 15 years ago, I was 10 years old, and I read a book called The Sign of the Beaver. And in that book, this boy is stranded, and he has to live off of the land and hunt for all of his food. But his rifle was stolen. So a Native American taught him how to build a bow and arrow, which he then used to hunt for his food. That book got me interested in hunting and bow making, and my grandpa supported that interest in every way possible. He took me to a guy's house that would teach me how to build bows, and so that I didn't have to wait to start hunting, he bought me a bow. And then when I broke that one, he bought me another bow. It took me 4 years to kill my first deer, and then after that, I went to college, and I picked my college based on where the best hunting opportunities were. And after that, I moved to Alaska to live off the land. And now I make bows for fun. So for the past 15 years, while I was becoming what I am now, this tree was growing in my grandpa's front yard.
Now you look at what will work for you here, and it don't matter which one.
It looks like we could probably get 100 bows out of that one. It's real straight.
Oh yeah, it is, isn't it?
My brother Andy is a professional tree trimmer, so we decided to stand back and watch the expert at work.
You got yourself a trade, didn't you? That is cool. Let's see, and where do we, I think we want to go straight back there if we got enough rope. Yeah.
He dropped this tree perfectly, and then we cut it into usable sections about 68 inches long. Once they were cut to length, I split them with wedges and an axe, and this was way more challenging than any of the woods I usually use.
Ain't cedar, is it?
No. It's almost all the way through, I think.
Yeah.
Wood.
That's beautiful.
It is beautiful.
Is there any midgets in Alaska? There's a short one over here.
This is a quarter of a hickory log, heck of a lot harder to split than a birch tree, but I think it'll make a much better bow. And I believe I could probably get at least 3 bows just out of this piece alone.
Welcome to the future. It's been about 3 months since we cut down that tree in Michigan, and we're back in Alaska, and I've split it a little bit further, and this is the piece that I'm going to make a bow out of today. This wood is probably not perfectly dry, but I'll get it roughed out into bow shape, and then I will set it on a form next to the wood stove, and I'll have it dry in no time. What I'm doing now is I'm using my big draw knife, holding it vertically and scraping the cambium off. The cambium is the dark stuff that's just underneath the bark. And I'm actually going to leave a little bit of cambium on because you can make sort of a camo pattern, but I want it to be as thin as possible. And I also don't want to cut through the growth ring underneath it when I take it off. So scraping is a good way to kind of be careful. Now that the back of this bow is pretty close to where I want it to be, I can always remove a little bit more cambium later. I want to draw out my design. The bottom limb is the thinner of the two, and at its skinniest, it's 1 5/8". So I'm just going to draw 2 parallel lines that are 1 5/8" down both of these limbs. These limbs are 26.5 inches long, so at 13 1/4, I've marked the halfway point on the limbs, and that's where I'll start to taper, and I'll taper down to a pretty narrow tip, probably 1/2 inch or less.
It's amazing how quickly it starts to look like a bow. Now that the tips are narrowed, it has its profile. I marked out where my arrow rest will be, but I'm not going to cut that until this is tillered. So the next step is to draw lines down the side of the bow at about 1/4 of an inch, and then very carefully bring the bow down to the same thickness from the handle to the tips. An important thing that I'm doing, because this wood is still a little bit green, has some moisture in it, I don't want to just leave this out because as it dries it might warp. So I have a form which just has, it's a 2x6 with 2 posts that come up in the middle, and I just clamp it down at both ends. This has a little bit of a curve to it, which gives the bow a little bit of backset, which will make it faster in the final production, but you could just use a 2x4 and it would do the same thing. Now I can leave it to dry for as long as I want. I don't have to rush through this bow build. If you used power tools like a bandsaw, you could get the whole bow done in probably a day. But this is kind of my source of entertainment. It's like reading a good book. I don't want it to be over fast. So I'm gonna do the whole thing with hand tools.
Before I can put a string on it, I need to cut some string grooves. So I just measured 1/2 inch from the back of the bow and then drew lines at a 45-degree angle. Alright, so this is my tailoring setup. This is just a couple of blocks, 1x2s screwed to the wall. There's a spacer behind and in front of the bow so that it doesn't wiggle back and forth. And then I've got a bow scale, or a luggage scale, attached to a rope with a pulley. And now I'm going to pull it down to my desired draw weight and check the bend and make sure that there's no weak spots or any spots that aren't bending. I'll mark with my pencil and then remove wood from those areas. I'll pull to my desired draw weight, which for this bow is 55 pounds. As I continue tillering, 55 pounds will pull the bow further down until I'm at my desired draw length. I'm noticing a little bit of stiffness right here in the mid-limb of this one. It would be safe to put a string on this bow now, but I want the ends to be bending more than the mid-limb. See how that one is bending more in here than it is here? Like this is almost completely straight. It's bending much better. That looks quite nice. I've tillered it pretty far with this long string, so I'm going to put a short string on it now. I'm actually using the same string. All I'm going to do is tie a knot, a bowyer's knot or a timber hitch, if you know what that is. I'm just going to tie it about 3 inches shy of the nock. So right about there. Just make a loop and go through twice. It's a bow. As soon as you put the string on it, you can tell right away what needs to be done. This needs to be bending more smoothly right through here. $25, $28, right there, 28. Not too bad. However, that's only 40 pounds. And it's also got a little bit of string follow. See how it looks like it's strung a little bit? That's because this is green wood. I cut this tree down not that long ago. I think that I'll be able to recover some draw weight by speed drying it with a heat gun. So I'm going to go clamp it back in my form, get it super duper hot, and then let it cool off for about a day. I'll shape my handle, stick it back on the tillering tree, and see how many more pounds we got. Right now it's measuring about 38 pounds at 28 inches. I really like heat treating my bows like this because it kind of gives a little bit of a chocolatey hue to the belly of the bow. I think it looks super cool. And it'll also prevent the wood from soaking up moisture in the future if you kind of char it a little bit. I've done this with fire before. I've done it with the heat gun. I've even done it with a kitchen stove. Let's take it off the form and see how many pounds we got back. It's taken a little bit of back set, so we got rid of that string follow. There's a lot of different ways to string a bow. The way I used to do it was I would take the bow limbs and I'd put my hip against the handle and my ankle against the tip, and I would string it over my leg. That's real good, especially if you're not very strong, but you run the risk of twisting your limbs. So I had a friend tell me that I should do it the push-pull way, which is if you put the one tip in your foot, pull on the handle, and push on this tip. This bow is definitely a lot stronger now. And slide the string over the end. Doesn't look like our tiller got messed up too much so far. Go put it on the tree and find out for real. $50 pounds at 28 inches. 49 pounds at 28 inches. So we gained about 10 pounds back by heat treating it. In Alaska, in order to hunt big game, most big game animals, your bow has to be at least 50 pounds. So being 49 is like pretty frustrating. I wish it was just 2 pounds heavier. You can do a few things to increase draw weight. You can add recurve tips, which would be bringing your tips forward, so the bow would have to be stressed more to get back to your draw length. You can shorten the bow by about an inch, adds 5 to 7 pounds, I've heard. But this bow is too short for that, and since I already heat treated it, I probably can't recurve it. So this one just is what it is. It's 49 pounds at 28 inches. Now, when you pick which one is top limb, you usually want a positive tiller, which means whichever one is bending slightly more would be your top limb. So I'm gonna draw out my handle design and start shaving it. After shaping about a dozen bow handles, I'm starting to finally get a feel for what I like. Something that seems really important to me is a groove for my thumb on the opposite side of the bow as the arrow. The tighter and deeper that groove is, the more consistent my handle position is, so the more accurately I can shoot. For a while, I was cutting arrow rests into all of my bows, and I liked that better than shooting off of my knuckle. But the problem with cutting an arrow rest on a self bow is that you're weakening the center of the handle. So I did an experiment on one of my other bows, and I kind of found an elegant solution. This is the tip of a caribou antler. I'm going to put that into the bow just like that. Here we go. Nice camo patterned hickory bow. I've got my little antler tine arrow rest. Lynx fur silencers. It's 49 pounds at 28 inches. I plan to use this bow to hunt black bears this spring and summer. When I moved to Alaska, hunting tags were really expensive because I was a non-resident for the first year, and the only tag I could afford was black bear. I got pretty decent at black bear hunting, and black bears became our main source of food for our first 3 years in Alaska. So being able to come full circle and combine all of the skills that I've gained since I read that book 15 years ago, I think would be really cool. Thanks, Grandpa. Not just for letting me cut down a tree in your yard, but for everything else too.